So I got busy with my study on, totally forgot to put the schedule up. I did have to read through 400 because the chapter goes through the era of good feelings, which I like to conclude with the War of 1812 with, and then we go back to the market revolution. That's why I skipped a few pages. But I'm going to add one more little bit to the pages, and I'll put the rest of the schedule up sometime. Just 400 to 409. So the first 9 pages of or the next 9 pages, so you had, was it 383 to 400, and then 400 to 409. And that gets through the era of good feelings, and then we start the election of 1824. We'll do the Missouri Compromise a little bit later, but the era of good feelings tomorrow, and then we start the Industrial Revolution. And I'll put the rest in there. And the Industrial Revolution would literally change everything, bring us something called capitalism. And on your test, the essay test. So mostly A's and B's in here. I thought for a first essay it was good. What I usually had to take points off was not getting enough explanation, not giving me examples. I thought the thesis statements were okay, some really good ones. And I try to add comments in everybody's. And if you can't read or understand what I was saying, please let me know. It's kind of a weird little thing. You have to put a comment and type it in. And it's just a little odd. And usually the big thing I would say, I want more explanation. You have to give some more concrete examples. I'm going to talk about it more, a little bit more in class tomorrow. There's still a few people haven't taken it. But since I got almost all of them graded, it will be the last major grade in your quarter. I'm putting in your notes, the last little bit of notes, but those are just my reward for you for doing that work. So I'll get that done. That won't take long. I'll do that after school today. It's not outside the period, so I just sit and do that real quick. But then I think I got almost everyone graded here. Almost. Some are really good. I think people got confused on things. I mean, it happens. And most people did philosophy, Jefferson's philosophy. And for that, you needed, yes, pragmatism, but the first thing I opened with was common man and agrarianism. So I was looking for a little bit on that, but for the most part, I thought it was good. And that is a good thing. Oh, let me get the screen down. The special topics, even though we're doing conspiracy theories, we went back just the last few days to cover about the election. And Friday, we got into socialism, climate change, abortion, legalization of marijuana, gay marriage, and racism. Kind of a big day. We solved all the problems. Nothing to worry about now. No, we're just talking about different ideologies. That's neat. They did really well. It had people yelling out from the speakers. They did a good class. Okay. So I think we got right to the Bladensburg races. We'll finish up the War of 1812. And we are a little behind. Sorry about that. I mean, 40-minute classes, so 10 minutes off. Everything takes longer. But I'm still going to go as much as I can. He made it through the first quarter. I think we have 3 weeks or 4 weeks till Thanksgiving.
3 weeks and a day.
3 days, isn't it?
I think it's just 3 weeks and a day, or 3 weeks and a day. This is Tuesday. I think we start Thanksgiving break.
Oh. That'll be a quick week. And then you do get 2 weeks off for Christmas, which is like, don't get me wrong, I have nothing wrong with breaks, but 2 weeks off during a pandemic isn't quite the same. I'd almost rather have no time off for Christmas if we get more time off at the end of May. If perhaps maybe the pandemic's over. Well, not no time, but not 2 weeks. But this is the world we live in. Okay, one more thing. On Wednesday, I might or might not be here. Well, I might. I guess we're not going to be here on Wednesday. But What I meant to say is I might be having a class, I might have a video online for you to watch. Really depends how late I stay up on Tuesday night. There's a very good chance I might not sleep. Huh?
Election is.
Oh, I see.
Slightly. Yeah, I'm gonna have a rager. She's gonna be out of control. I want because I'm one of those people I've got to know, and probably the governor's race. Actually, it's all three statewide races are going to be three of the major ones. Really, I mean, they're all toss-ups. It might not be till 3 or 4 in the morning, and I'm someone who has to wait. I gotta know. This is a big deal, especially the governor's race that will have a direct impact on my job. So, it's one of those things I gotta. So I might, if I stay up all night, I might alter my plan. I'll let you know. Sound good? If we know early, I will have a regular class, but I'll put it up on Teams. You'll know. Don't worry about it. All right. So I think we got the. Didn't we get to just the burning of the Capitol on Friday? Does that sound right? Oh, one more thing. My little mask. My ears look really big with this mask. I like my mask. I have it. At least it fit. The strap broke when I was putting it on. So unfortunately, I had these kind of my reserve masks in my truck. One of those things you have, and it's not too bad, but it's really making me flap. But that's life.
Is that one like one of the Costco ones?
It could be. I have no idea. But my wife bought a couple bags. I just stuck one in my truck, so I have that full reserve. Probably is. So. We got to the burning of the Capitol. We got that. I think I showed you this picture. That's a great picture. I mean, the painting. Do you really see it? Didn't I tell you about the bullet holes in here? So I told you that story. Bullet holes. Washington D.C. burnt down. Remember that the United States won at Lake Champlain right here, and so then they raided the blockade very effective, and then they raided up here to Washington, D.C., and then the relatively new city of Baltimore, already becoming a major harbor. Same deal, the plan was to go up there, burn it. Just a raid. And then when hurricane season is over, New Orleans. And don't forget, nobody wanted this war anymore. The United States realized it was a total failure. The British have just been fighting for 25 years straight, pretty much. They don't want the war anymore. And so, Baltimore. And the plan was simple: go Chesapeake, just up Washington, D.C. Do a naval attack on the forts, most of them unfinished, protecting Baltimore Harbor, but then attack overnight. And this is just a raid. It's not a full-scale operation. They just want to burn Baltimore down. This is a slap in the face. This is so when they go to the treaty negotiations, which were just about ready to begin, they didn't know it at the time, here, this will give the British a better position. And this is actually what's going well for the British. Same deal, the militia ran away. But the relatively narrow harbor, the bay, they couldn't bring in their big ships, so they brought in smaller gunboats. They had cannon, mortars. Mortars fire a shot that goes like almost straight up and down to lob down on the defenses. They're usually, forts don't have its thick ceilings, roofs, and then rockets. Have you ever seen a bottle rocket before? You know what a bottle rocket is? Imagine a big bottle rocket. That's what they were. A pole with a barrel of gunpowder. And they were partially used because they were spectacular and scared the enemy, but they kind of flew up in the air and they hoped they would kind of plunge and have enough gunpowder left to make a little bit of an explosion and weaken the hull. But the big thing was just to be spectacular. The main U.S. fort was Fort McHenry. It was unfinished. A masonry, meaning a brick fort. It didn't have its shelters for the men finished. They're called bomb-proofs back then. And it's unfinished, and it juts out into the harbor. Now this whole area of this peninsula is a national park, and it is beautiful. It's a really pretty harbor, got this nice park, and the fort is still there. Let me make sure this is all recording okay. Recording, everybody seems to be relatively happy. We had some sound issues first period. I don't think it was my fault. I think just intermittent internet. And so the British are advancing overland, and then they're going to bombard the fort on the night of September 13th and 14th. Here's a very famous watercolor of it. And you can see these are the mortars plunging down. But I guess the rock is still black powder, loud. It must have been spectacular. That's a contemporary picture of the fort today. And you'll notice the ramparts, these walls in front. It was half finished. They would finish it after the war. It would become a prison during the Civil War. And now it's a national park. It's really cool, well preserved. The rangers there give great tours. I was a great admiration for the Park Service. And as just happened to be, a young lawyer by the name of Francis Scott Key was on board a British ship, the Ghent. He was trying to free a friend of his, Dr. Beach, who had been captured by the British, being detained. And so he happened to be on board this ship, and they actually did release his friend, but Keyes was told, you can't leave. And so he was a witness to the bombardment from a British ship. And in it, he saw this spectacular attack, another watercolor. You know, those rockets must have been unreal, watching this night attack. Here's another engraving of it. And the last thing he remembered seeing was the massive flag from Fort McHenry. It's huge, this flag. He saw that. And what the assumption would be is that flag would not be up. They would not put the flag of the morning, they would surrender. There's no way the fort could resist this. They would have called it, they would have reduced the fort. That's what he thought. But in the morning, he saw the flag. Now, these are pictures taken after the Civil War. And the flag is massive. That's over 3 stories. It's huge. And they cut off a big hunk. You see all this? And actually, someone cut off the star. People cut it off for souvenirs. They cut little pieces so they could have it. I know, looking back, why did you do that? But then again, that's the kind of thing people do to this day. And this gives you an idea of the size of this flag. It is massive. And he saw this flag, meaning the fort did not surrender. And that inspired him. Well, first off, when the fort didn't surrender, the British retreated. They didn't burn Baltimore. It wasn't worth it. They came what they wanted for. They burned Washington, D.C. So Baltimore was not burnt. And Francis Scott Key would be inspired to write a poem, The Defense of Fort McHenry. We call it the Star-Spangled Banner. And this is one of the reenactments of it, where they have rockets and they do this big fireworks show. I would really like to go to that. September's a bad time for me to ever get to Baltimore, but maybe some year we take a field trip. They could get in a little yellow bus and drive there. If we don't sleep. Yeah. Yeah. Say it again, what? Francis Scott Key, the guy who was on board the ship, to try to release his friend. Key wrote it. And that's the flag. It's at the Smithsonian Museum of American History. And they have totally reconditioned it thread by thread. It took over a decade. And so it is now pretty vibrant colors. And they have underneath, gives you an idea of the full length, the size of the flag. And you walk in, you have the special room, and it's massive because the thing's 4 stories. And you can see the flag. If you get a chance, once again, it's another one. Go. It's really amazing. Yeah.
I think there's supposed to be 13 stars.
No, there are more states.
Good to know.
Now we have 50 stars.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I knew that one.
And originally they were going to do a star and a stripe for each new state, and the flag got way too big. And so they stopped the stripe to 13, and then they added stars. It wouldn't be until the late 1880s until they actually set a set pattern for the stars, because they're starting to get too crowded. Before, you have all kinds of neat designs, like that one for the Civil War. There's all kinds of circles. They made all kinds of stuff. But now, you know, too many stars. I think that the coolest flag of the stars, I like that. I like the Civil War ones, but the 48 star flag. 6 rows of 8. I just think that looks really cool. So with that, we only know the first verse. There are 4 verses. Does this look familiar? And it's a fighting song. It's a song about a battle. And you can stalk it, the twilight's last gleaming. He's talking about the last thing he saw, just as it got dark, just as the bombardment began, all night. The flag, the ramparts, the fortifications of the fort, the rockets, the bombs or the shells with a little bit of gunpowder, not high explosive, but, and then it still whistles. Now, the thing about it was, oh, there's a picture of Francis Scott Key, very dramatic, him on the, holding on to the lines here, watching it, not like that, but what the heck, right? Here's the handwritten one. The third verse is actually one of the more controversial ones and nobody remembers because it's about slaves. The British were doing the same thing in the War of 1812 that the British did in the Revolutionary War. Do you remember how they freed slaves? I mean, they offered slaves their freedom if they fought for the British. And so that line here, no refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror and flight or the gloom of the grave. Oh yeah, we're going to kill you, slaves who fought for the British. And triggering a slave rebellion. And so that would be one of the more controversial lines of this that people forget. But, you know, we only remember the first stanza. But ironically, one thing about those soldiers. Yeah, I think free is relative. We're free to have slaves. Remember, slavery was ingrained in all of this. Francis Scott Key's grandfather was a Confederate. And ironically, he would be imprisoned for trying to revolt in Baltimore in 1861 in Fort McHenry for being a Confederate. So we do have a complex history. And then those British soldiers who were former U.S. slaves would settle in the Bahamas and Bermuda. And to this day, their descendants are called Americans, which I just think is awesome. But there's a British soldier, I love the top hat. There's the home of American settlement in the Bahamas. That is a graveyard in the Bahamas. Rains a lot, yeah. Yeah, they fought for the British. Mm-hmm. So here, British soldier, that was a former U.S. slave. I love the top hat. That is a great uniform. So once again, we get to the complexities of our history. Well, back one more little story about this. He wrote a poem, but he had a tune in his head. The tune was to Anacreon in heaven. The Anacreon or Anacreonic society was a society that got together and they wanted to, the idea is enjoy life to its fullest, meaning it was a drinking society. And the song was, here's the words to Anacreon in heaven, and when this answer arrived, the jolly old Grecian voice and fiddle and flute no longer be moot. I mean, basically to be drinking. In fact, the words, the song was to be standing around the piano and they'd be playing it, and they'd sing and then scream, sing, scream. That was the music that Francis Scott Key had when he wrote The Defense of Fort McHenry. And so that's the music that people would sing it to, starting about 1820s into the 1830s. Was not the national anthem, but it would be pretty popular, especially in the North by the 1860s. And has anyone, have you ever tried to sing it? Well, you know how hard the national anthem is to sing? Because it is low, then it goes really high. Well, this is why, because it's meant to be screamed around a piano while drunk. And we stuck with the song. During World War I, before the U.S. got involved, the U.S. did not have a national anthem. In fact, that was kind of a new thing. My Country 'Tis of Thee was actually more popular, but it's the same music as God Save, at that time, God Save the King, the British national anthem. So Star Spangled Banner was also really popular. So by executive order, Wilson said this would be the national anthem, and then by law, 1931. And this is an article from 31 saying it is too warlike. Pacifists are very upset. A lot of pacifists after World War I. I think you can imagine why. because it's a true fighting song. And one more thing about that would be that in World War II, that's when they started playing the national anthem before professional sporting events, kind of the nationalism because of the war. They quit after the war, but then the Cold War began, and they went through a literal madness. They proved everybody was American. They brought the national anthem back. In the 1950s, it started to be done at like sporting events, like high school events, which is now the norm. And yeah, after the war, people, a lot of like professional baseball, that was the most popular sport. They're like, why do we do the national anthem? No one does it before they go to work. Else, but it became a part of the Cold War, and that's the legacy exists to this day. That's where it comes from. So that's the story of the national anthem. While that is going on, they actually were starting to meet in Ghent, Belgium. In Ghent. You remember I always said Paris was a good place for treaties? Napoleon had just surrendered. They didn't want it in Paris. Actually, there was no Belgium yet. But now it's in Ghent, Belgium. Neat town. And the treaty was another one of those I mentioned before, status quo ante bellum. The way it was before the war. Need a drink? The way it was before the war. And the U.S. Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, John Adams' son. And so the war ended like nothing happened. In fact, the U.S. was just happy to survive. The United States was completely humiliated by this war, especially when parts of the country were threatening to leave the Union during the war. Just as they're negotiating, just after Washington, D.C. was burnt, a convention called the Hartford Convention met. 26 Federalists met in secret. And they talked about nullifying, which is not obeying any laws about the war or even seceding from the Union. But fortunately, the war ended before this could happen. And after the war, in many ways, this felt the end of the Federalist Party. They looked like unpatriotic traitors, and this is where you get this. This is a Republican. Here's Lady Columbia with the eagle, kind of a creepy eagle, looks vaguely like a vulture. You know, the people's rights, no corruption. Hartford Convention, the Federalists, and who's that? Beelzebub, the devil, with the British crown. The Federalists never survived. In 5 years, the Federalist Party would be dead. Fortunately, this did not happen. The war ended. But the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions threatened this back in the 1790s. 2 different times, there were threats to break away parts of the Union during Jefferson's presidency, and another time. The U.S. was always on really shaky ground. It's kind of amazing it survived. 1833, it just about, or 1820 about happened. 1833, it just about happened. 1845 or 1848, it just about happened. 1850, 1854, and then the biggie's coming. But while all of this is going on, there's another war that's being fought. And the U.S. would use the attack on the British as an excuse, but it's called the Creek War. And that's put by the United States to get rid of these powerful southwestern tribes. The Creek, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, these incredibly powerful tribes down here. The Creek were the most powerful. And they had control over much of this land, some by treaty. But during the War of 1812, the U.S. claimed that the Creek were being aided by the British, which, yeah, the British did funnel some weapons there. But U.S. militia and some regular forces under a very capable commander, also a very harsh commander, by the name of Andrew Jackson, would eventually right here, Andrew Jackson, his army would fight and defeat the Confederacy led by the Creeks. One of the, it ranks right there with Tippecanoe, but probably not quite as important, the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. That picture right there is the diorama of Horseshoe Bend. And a combination of bad luck and good tactics by Jackson, the Creeks fortified, they had a walled village established. Their fortifications were outflanked, and it was a disaster for the Creek. Jackson's commanders lost control of their men, and it turned into a slaughter as the Creek fled. Jackson was ultimately responsible, and even though he ordered it to stop, he's going to be blamed because he was responsible. You'll see people today say he ordered it. He did not, but he was responsible. He's in overall command. There's complexities here. Here's Chief Osceola surrendering to Jackson right here. And this is the Southwestern Confederacy would be completely destroyed. Tippecanoe, maybe it was the last effort, but the final nail in the coffin for any resistance of American Indians would be Horseshoe Bend. And then Jackson went on to New Orleans. Because remember New Orleans? When the Treaty of Ghent was signed on Christmas Eve, December 24, 1814, there was no way to get the information down to Jamaica, where the British invasion fleet was. So it had sailed. They didn't know the war was over. Jackson has made his way to New Orleans, and he didn't know the war was over. So the biggest battle of the War of 1812 will be fought 2.5 weeks after the war had ended. And they had no idea. But this would turn the entire attitude of the United States about the war. The Battle of New Orleans. General Jackson had about 6,000 men, militia, submarine soldiers, and pirates. About 1,000 pirates. The bayous of Louisiana would be perfect for pirates. So there are lots of pirates. This whole hodgepodge of people. The British had one of their best generals, Edward Pakenham, one of their heroes of the Napoleonic Wars. He had 10,000 crack troops. And a pretty good plan. New Orleans is surrounded by swampy bayous, but there was one avenue of attack that they took. This is called Lake Bourne, right here. It's called a lake even though it's part of the ocean. It kind of looks like a lake. If you go here, there's relatively dry ground to the Mississippi River. Then march along the Mississippi River and take New Orleans. That's the plan. Jackson knew that's the only place they could attack. So he's waiting right here. Now, all along the Mississippi River, at least for about 40 miles south of New Orleans, they had dredged the swamp right along the river here for sugar plantations. So it's marshy land, flat, with canals running through from really big swamp here. So imagine, river, swamp, flat, marshy land with canals. Sugar plantations. Here's New Orleans. So if you go there today, you drive through New Orleans, it's French Quarter, kind of here, boom, you're at the national park with a battlefield. Right here's a nuclear power plant. So the British had to go around the nuclear power plant and then attack this one. And there's no nuclear power. That's you. It's a little weird going to this battlefield and that nuclear power plant is right there. There's no nuclear power plants in Montana, so it's just kind of weird. And you missed the fun in 1979 where there was a near meltdown in the nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania called 3 Mile Island. That's why they've not built a nuclear power plant since. And so I had bad dreams about that for a long time. So I don't like nuclear power plants. Not back to this. Before. 7 years before Chernobyl, yeah. Chernobyl did nothing.
Yeah.
3 Mile Island, which is near Hartford, Pennsylvania, just about nothing.
I was gonna say if it was after Chernobyl, I feel like they would have been like,
Yeah. But we haven't built one since. And so with that, the British plan was, well, they're going to attack, it's January 8th, 1815. So it's long after the war ended. January 8th, 1815. And it had gotten below freezing a number of the nights, but then went up above freezing during the day. Can you imagine kind of just, sugar plantation, you have this mud, just a layer of water over it, ice at night, mud all day, cold as cold could be. Jackson's plan, they put a mound of dirt called a berm, about 8 feet high. Had his men behind that. And there's one of the widest canals here. So the British have to go through the canal and then up the berm. Good idea. The British plan, sun up, diversionary attack here, main attack, just go right over the wall. The first men who would lead the British line, they're going to march in columns. The first men are going to be carrying ladders. So they would put, the first guy would put the ladder over the canal and they kind of tippy on the beam. The next guy would put the ladder over the berm so they could cross over. By the way, do we, any volunteers to run over a mile of swampy ground with a ladder? 50-foot ladder? And think about every step. When they came out, what's that first step going to be? Just, and then stuck. So they're, and so Jackson just waited till they got range in order for his men to open fire, and it was a slaughter. A slaughter. The British got disoriented, and a line of British men turned this way. Can you imagine how the slaughter was when they're lined up this way, hit from the side? Ironically, the only place the British nearly broke through was the diversion. They got to the line, but never over. General Pakenham was mortally wounded right in front of this line. The Battle of New Orleans would be a decisive, at least in opinion, in attitude, American victory. There's another painting of this battle. I like this when you see the line. It's a pretty good painting. If you get a chance, go there. Has anyone been in New Orleans? For one? How long ago? Several years. New Orleans is really cool. It's not quite the same after Hurricane Katrina, but it's really pretty cool. That was actually the day after Christmas a few years ago, that picture. But you don't need to know the numbers. I just put the numbers up there to give you an idea how decisive this victory was. Isn't that amazing? Hey, you're out in the open. You're the ones getting killed. A huge victory. And here's Pakenham's battle body being taken away. The British bury their soldiers on the battlefield. I told you that before. Now the enlisted men, they just throw in the swamp. Alligator food. Yeah. But Pakenham was a hero. They brought his body back to the ships in Lake Dorne. In fact, his wife was on the ship. Since he's a prominent general, his wife came along. So he received the body. He's going to go back for a state funeral. But how do you preserve a body on a trip that could be a month? Remember, these are still sailing vessels. Yeah, put it in alcohol. And every ship had alcohol. Because every British soldier would get 2 drams, which is about 2 cups of grog. That's what they called it, every day. A grog is some kind of watered down alcohol, rum, gin, something like that. So they have barrels of this. So it's a barrel of rum, probably about 20% alcohol, and they took Pakenham's body and jammed it in the barrel and nailed it shut. So you can imagine with 20% alcohol, how much that would preserve, all right? It was a long voyage. The winds were bad, and after a couple weeks, they ran out of grog for the men.
Oh my God. Isn't there like a sailor song about this? I feel like there's a shanty.
There's a lot of shanties about drinking grog, but not about, I don't know what about this. But by the way, a shanty is a great name for a song, isn't it? A sailor shanty, yeah, a sea shanty. There is one, I love my grog and things like that. But when they got to Portsmouth and opened the barrel was dry except for this gray thing. So what had happened? Some of the men were thirsty and clearly not picky. Okay, with that, Pakenham's body lies in state at the Tower of London. Not state, I'm sorry, it's encrypted. I said state, it's encrypted. Well, you probably won't care too much. But this is going to lead the war. And it made Americans feel like they won the war because of the Battle of New Orleans. We felt like we won. We didn't win, but we felt like we did. And this is going to lead to something that is brand new. I mean, literally brand new. It's called nationalism. And this you have to write down. Nationalism is an intense love for your country. Why? Yeah. Intense love of your country because it's your country. Intense love of your country because it's your country. That's why you love it. I love my country because it's the greatest country because it's my country. Therefore, I love my country because it's the greatest country because I love my country. And so on and so on. When people say patriotism today, what they really mean is nationalism. We'll talk more about patriotism a little bit more, but patriotism is love of your country for what it stands for. Nationalism, you love your country because it's your country. And this is a brand new attitude in the world. And other places were very nationalistic, but part of it was like the French were nationalists because we're French. We are French and we're great. The British are great because they're British. You have the Germans who want their own country of Germany because we're Germans and we're great. Americans are a little bit different. And so it just became because we're here. We're great. And nationalism will have some problems in the 20th century. Because intense love of your country, blind love for your country, that can be dangerous. That's the kind of thing that leads to wars. World War I was all nationalism. All nationalism. And that's literally Armageddon. That's a thing that would change everything, like the Industrial Revolution. So it fits in that citizens of the US, this would confirm that idea coming from Tippecanoe. We're Americans, it's our continent. It's ours. And we're something special because we're here. Next, out of this. After Horseshoe Bend especially, there'd be no more American Indian threat. And you can see a little change in attitudes towards American Indians. From standing for liberty to, you see more and more talk of that American Indians were savages just using up the land. It's our land. So we'll talk more about this. Other times where American Indians will try to protect their land, and it is all part of a tragic and horrific last stand. All of it. Next, we survived. We survived. So after this, Britain basically had to accept the United States is here to stay. And will become a combination of trading partner and threat, which will go back and forth for years. We made it. Sometimes you see this called the Second War of Independence. The Federalist Party, gone. But this would also trigger a dramatic shift. And the next two things go hand in hand, the transportation revolution. Remember I told you there are no roads to get the few trained troops the US have in Washington, D.C.? This would help trigger a need, a desire for roads. We have to start connecting this country. And then even more important, what will change the world, the Industrial Revolution. Remember the US could not get British goods. Remember the Embargo Act and then the blockade? This would trigger American merchants to start making their own textiles. Where? The Industrial Revolution. And out of this, we'll have a brand new world. We're coming to the moment where it's going to start creating a world that all of us can understand. It would start making sense. If they dropped us in 1815, it would have made no sense. 1870, okay, I understand. It's a world I can comprehend. 1900, it's our world. Just on a computer chip, but it's still basically our world. And so, a couple things really quick after the war. Don't write this. I'll start this tomorrow, okay? the national anthem, but it is really hard to sing. Anyone chorus or part try to sing well? Isn't it hard? Are you good? Can you get the notes? See, I can't get any notes. So, but it's pretty low. I mean, you got to go high. That's hard, even for coffee singers. Have a great day. Right when you find work, and hang by your thumbs. And send that to me.
I will.
I think the only person to ever sing the national anthem perfectly was Whitney Houston in the Super Bowl.
But she's got a freaky voice.
But it was beautiful.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm saying no. It's amazing. I think there's a few, but yeah, she had one of those. 91. I still remember that.